They say television killed the radio star, but the boom of podcasts is proving the allure of audio remains strong. With Apple reporting the worldwide number of podcast downloads hit 10 billion in 2016, people are clearly still content to simply listen. The emergence of podcasts is slowly but surely changing the audio landscape in Australia, with popular radio company Nova recently announcing a podcast partnership, while national broadcaster the ABC is also putting an emphasis on podcast creation. One of the people behind the ABC's foray into podcasts is Mike Williams, with his show The Real Thing, seeking to tell important stories of regional Australia.
Hey, this is The Real Thing, and we're a podcast that tries to get out into the corners of this country, and when we get there, we celebrate unique characters and we tell their stories for you.
Cutting his teeth on radio, Mike couldn't resist the power of a podcast and their ability to tell powerful stories.
So we talk in radio a lot about one-to-one. You know, you just imagine you're talking to one person in their car, and it's the same with podcasting, is even somewhat more intimate because you're literally in their earbuds. So that connection, that relationship is changing, and it's becoming more intimate, which is why I think podcasting is an extension of radio in some ways, an extension of storytelling, and a more intimate way of doing that.
As a radio host and sound and music student, Maddie McQuinn can regularly be found with her earphones plugged in.
I try to listen to 3 hours of stuff a day. So I listen to an hour of music and an hour of podcasts, and then the other hour is like entirely new, mix of both.
Despite many speculating that podcasts are cutting further into the radio market, audience measurement company GfK reported that 86% of Australians that took part in their survey listened to more radio over this past summer. Mike particularly adamant that despite podcast popularity, radio still serves a very vital purpose and that it can actually benefit from the podcast medium.
I don't see this big divide in radio and podcast. A lot of people talk about it, but like podcast is killing radio or those sorts of ideas. I'm a big believer that that's not the case. I think that the challenge is you've got two products now. So if you've done a traditional radio show, you've now got your linear audience, but then you've also got this a different platform that you have to tweak your product for.
Maddie firmly of the belief that podcasts and radio aren't rivals.
It's less of podcasts taking over radio and more podcasts like working with radio, and neither one is more important. And you can have one without the other, obviously, but I think what we're moving towards is both at the same time instead of like them working against each other.
With more than 250,000 podcasts available on iTunes alone, Mike does admit the ability to stand out in the podcast game is getting increasingly difficult.
Everyone always asks this question, are we in a bubble with podcasting? Because there's been such growth over the past few years. I think what will happen is the bubble won't necessarily explode. What will happen is there's just so many competitors having podcasts that they will dilute the current industry leaders. And that's where I think from the ABC's perspective, we've got to be really careful, and it's really important that we're in this space.
Though thrown in the deep end of such a competitive market, Mike is happy to be swimming in the waters of podcast creation and thinks it's vital the ABC attempts to utilize it as a way to attract a new audience.
I think podcasting is one of the ways that the ABC will ensure that it is continuing to be relevant for new audiences. It's just that's just why it's so critical that shows like The Real Thing are being encouraged, and I'm lucky to be in that position where we're telling stories that the stories themselves are relevant to younger people, but also what's just as important is they're being told in a way that are relevant to young people as well.
So rest assured that television didn't in fact kill the radio star, with podcasts proving there's still a very healthy heartbeat echoing in our ears.